It started like any other day on Earth. People were going about their lives, working, playing, and living. But something was different. The sky above them wasn't the same. It felt heavy. The air was thick with tension. For the first time, people looked up and saw something that shouldn't be there. At first it was just a speck, a small dot in the distance, floating high above the clouds. It looked like a strange star, moving against the natural flow of the night sky. Some people thought it was a new satellite, or maybe some kind of space debris. But it wasn't. It was something far bigger, something that no one had ever seen before. As the days passed, the dot grew larger, and more of them appeared. Ships, so huge they blocked out the sun, began to arrive in waves. These weren't normal ships. They looked like something out of a science fiction movie. Their dark, metallic surfaces glinted in the sunlight, and their strange shapes made them look like they didn't belong in the Earth's sky. Each ship was bigger than the tallest building, and there were hundreds of them, circling the planet. People stared, unsure of what to think. Some were excited, thinking it might be a peaceful first contact with aliens. Others felt afraid, their instincts telling them that something wasn't right. News outlets across the world quickly started reporting on the strange ships, but no one knew who or what they belonged to. The government scrambled to understand what was happening. Military leaders held emergency meetings, but even they were unsure of what they were dealing with. The ships were too far away to reach, and no one could make contact. Radio signals and messages bounced off them, but there was no response. The ships just hovered, silent and still, watching. As the days turned into a week, fear began to grow. People spoke of the ships as though they were a dark omen, a sign that something terrible was about to happen. Some claimed that Earth was being invaded, while others hoped it was a misunderstanding. But deep down, everyone knew something was coming. The ships continued to circle. Then, one day, something changed. A loud hum filled the air, and the ships began to move closer. They didn't land, but they lowered, descending slowly into Earth's atmosphere. The sight was awe-inspiring, but it was also terrifying. The ships moved as one, perfectly synchronized, a show of power and control. Panic spread across the world. People began to wonder why the ships were here. What did they want? Why were they just hovering, observing? Was Earth going to be destroyed, or worse, taken over? In every city, there were whispers and rumors. Some said the ships belonged to an advanced alien race. Others said they were the scouts of a much larger force. The fear that gripped the world was not just about the ships. It was about what the ships represented. Earth had never faced anything like this before. No one had ever come from the stars, and no one had ever been this close to Earth's doorstep. Leaders from every corner of the planet met urgently to discuss what to do. The world's most powerful nations called for calm. But it was hard to stay calm when the skies were filled with strange ships that could easily be hostile. The idea of fighting back seemed impossible. The ships were so much more advanced than anything humans had, and they showed no signs of communicating. It was like they were waiting for something. Then, at a global summit, one leader stood up. He was not a soldier or a politician, but a scientist, someone who had spent his life studying the stars. He didn't believe Earth was powerless, but he also knew that war wasn't the first answer. "We don't know who they are," he said, "but we must show them that we are not afraid. We must send a message." The room went silent. A message. A warning. It was a bold move, but some agreed it was their only choice. Tell them we are here. Tell them we will not back down. Tell them Earth is not a world to be taken lightly. A few hesitated, but soon the plan was set into motion. A message would be broadcast to the ships in space, a message that would speak to the unknown invaders and show them that Earth would not be easily conquered. But what would the message say? What words could possibly make a difference against such a powerful force? They didn't have the answers, but they had one thing: determination. As the message began to be prepared, Earth held its breath. Would the invaders listen? Would they understand that this world, their world, was worth protecting? No one knew, but the first step was clear. Earth would speak, and it would not be silent. The warning had to go out, because if Earth didn't act now, it might be too late. As the strange ships hovered above Earth, the world's leaders came together in a desperate attempt to figure out what to do. The fear was palpable. Every government, every nation, was on edge. What were the ships? Who were the people, or beings, behind them? Were they peaceful visitors, or was this the beginning of an invasion? No one had the answers, and the uncertainty was suffocating. The world's most powerful leaders gathered in a secure underground bunker, a place meant for the most serious of situations. President Clara Matthews, the leader of the United States, stood at the front of the room. She was calm on the outside, but inside, she was as frightened as everyone else. The weight of the situation pressed down on her. This was the moment that could define humanity's future. If they made the wrong choice, Earth could be lost forever. The room was filled with generals, politicians, scientists, and diplomats. Everyone spoke over one another, shouting opinions, suggestions, and fears. The chaos was overwhelming. "We need to defend ourselves," General Samuel Green shouted, slamming his fist on the table. "They're here to conquer us. We can't sit back and wait for them to make the first move." "No," replied Dr. Rachel Simmons, an expert in extraterrestrial studies. "We don't know if they're here to attack. They haven't shown any signs of aggression. We need to communicate with them first, before jumping to conclusions. We need to find out what they want." But the general wasn't convinced. "You want us to talk to them? What if they're just waiting for us to show weakness? We need to be ready to fight." The debate continued for hours. Some argued for a diplomatic approach. Others insisted on preparing for war. No one could agree. And the ships, massive and silent, continued to circle the planet, a constant reminder of the uncertainty that hung over the room. President Matthews watched the arguments unfold, her mind racing. She was well aware of the weight of this decision. The fate of the planet rested in her hands. But how could she make the right choice? Could they really trust these strange beings in the sky? Or was the only option to fight? Finally, amidst the heated discussion, a voice spoke up from the back of the room. It was a young man, someone no one had expected to be heard. His name was Lieutenant James Harper, a military officer who had served on the front lines in various conflicts. He wasn't a politician, but he had a reputation for being calm under pressure. He'd seen battles, he'd seen chaos, but he was one of the few who wasn't panicking. His voice cut through the noise. "I don't think we should be making a decision based on fear," James said quietly. All eyes turned to him, and the room fell silent. "We've faced threats before. We've fought wars. But this is different. These aren't just any invaders. We have no idea what they're capable of. What if they don't want to fight us at all?" The room went still. It was a simple point, but it hit everyone hard. The truth was, no one knew what the ships wanted. The Empire had shown no signs of aggression. They were just there, watching. "Maybe," James continued, "we should send them a message, a warning. Let them know that we're not going to give up without a fight, but also that we're not just going to let fear control us. We need to show them that we're a force to be reckoned with, but we don't need to be the aggressors." For a moment, the room was silent. President Matthews locked eyes with James. There was something in his words that made sense. They couldn't just attack without knowing what the Empire wanted, but they also couldn't just sit back and wait to be destroyed. They needed to act, calmly, but with strength. "You're right," President Matthews said, standing up. "We don't know what they want, but we do know one thing. We won't go down without a fight. I want a message sent to the ships, right now. Let them know that Earth will defend itself if necessary, but we want peace. We need to show them that we're not afraid." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. The decision was made. The message would be sent. But what would it say? What could they possibly say to beings from another world beings so advanced that they seemed invincible. What words could stand against that kind of power? The room fell into a tense silence as the leaders watched one of the communications officers prepare the message. The officer worked quickly, typing the simple but powerful statement. The message would be short and to the point. We know you're here. Earth will defend itself if we have to. But we also want peace. Do not make us your enemies. It was a clear message, but no one knew if it would be enough. The leaders of Earth could only hope that the invaders would understand it. They had no idea how the Empire would respond, or if they would respond at all. But at least they had acted. As the message was transmitted to the ships in space, the leaders of Earth waited, holding their breath. Would the ships send a reply? Would the Empire listen? Or would this be the beginning of a battle that no one was prepared for? Only time would tell. The message was sent, and now, Earth could do nothing but wait. The room fell into silence as the leaders of the world gathered in their command centers, watching the skies for any sign of a response. The world was on edge. No one knew what to expect from the strange ships that had come from beyond the stars. Would they listen? Would they attack? The uncertainty was unbearable. President Clara Matthews stood at the window of the underground bunker, her eyes focused on the sky above. The massive ships were still there, hovering silently, just out of reach. She had made the decision to send the warning, but now the weight of it pressed down on her. Had they done the right thing? Had they sent enough of a message? Could they truly defend Earth if it came to that? She turned as a communications officer entered the room. His face was grim. "Ma'am," he said, "we've received a reply." A wave of tension swept through the room. Everyone waited for the officer to continue, eyes fixed on him, every ear listening for the answer that would change everything. He clicked a button, and the large screen in the center of the room flickered to life. A deep electronic voice filled the air. It was a language no one on Earth had ever heard before, but it was clear enough to understand that the voice was speaking directly to them. The message was short, cold, and direct. "We are the Galactic Empire. We have received your message. Prepare for invasion." The words struck the room like a hammer. The warning had failed. There was no peace, no understanding, just a clear and terrifying declaration. The Empire was coming, and they were not here for negotiations. The tension that had been building for weeks now reached a boiling point. General Samuel Green, who had been calling for war since the beginning, was the first to speak. "I knew it," he shouted, slamming his fist onto the table. "They never wanted peace. They were just waiting for us to show weakness. Now it's too late. We need to prepare for battle." President Matthews closed her eyes for a moment, gathering her thoughts. She knew the stakes. They were up against a force so advanced that their weapons and technology were beyond anything Earth had ever seen. But giving in to fear and rushing into war would be a mistake. They had to stay calm and think clearly. "Hold on," Matthews said, her voice steady despite the panic she felt. "We don't know what they're capable of. They've given us a warning, too. This could be an attempt to make us fear them. We need to stay focused. We need to prepare ourselves. But we can't act out of panic." The room was divided. Some wanted to fight immediately, while others agreed with Matthews that rushing into war would be a mistake. The decision was not easy, but Matthews knew that if they wanted a chance to survive, they couldn't let fear control them. They had to act with strategy, not just emotion. Meanwhile, across the world, panic spread. People took to the streets, afraid of what the future would bring. In some cities, people began preparing for the worst. Families packed bags, hoping to escape to safer places. Others hoarded supplies, fearing that the Empire's invasion would come soon. Every TV station, every news outlet, broadcasted the same terrifying message. The Empire was coming, and they were not here for peace. On the ground, Earth's military forces began to prepare. The weapons, once thought to be powerful, now seemed insignificant compared to the overwhelming power of the Empire. Soldiers trained harder than ever before, But they all knew the truth. No one knew if Earth's weapons would be enough to stop the Empire. In every country, leaders and generals met to discuss a united plan. If they were to survive, they would need to fight together, putting aside old differences for the sake of Earth's survival. Earth's fate now rested on their ability to unite as one. Back in the command center, President Matthews took a deep breath. "Prepare everything," she said, her voice now firm and commanding. "Prepare for war, but do not forget why we are fighting. We are fighting for our survival, for our families, for our planet, and we will not go down without a fight." The room fell silent again, but this time, the silence was filled with resolve. Earth's leaders had made their decision. The warning had been sent, and now it was clear. The Empire had no intention of negotiating. The war was coming, whether they were ready or not. But even as the preparations began, one question remained in everyone's mind. Was Earth strong enough to face the might of the Galactic Empire? The fate of the planet would soon be determined, and there was no turning back. The world held its breath. After receiving the chilling response from the Galactic Empire, Earth's leaders scrambled to prepare for what seemed to be an unavoidable conflict. The ships were still circling above, silent and menacing, their dark silhouettes casting shadows over the land. But in the midst of this growing chaos, something unexpected happened. For days, there was no word from the Empire. Earth's military forces worked tirelessly to organize a defense. Every soldier, every weapon, was being readied for a battle that might not come. But in the silence of those days, something strange began to unfold. The ships didn't move closer, and they didn't engage in any kind of aggression. They simply waited. In the command center, President Clara Matthews stood by the large screen, staring up at the images of the ships floating in space. It was as if the Empire was watching them, studying them. Matthews had never been so uncertain of anything in her life. Every instinct told her to prepare for war, but there was a nagging feeling in her gut. The Empire hadn't attacked, and they hadn't made any further threats. They had simply paused. Why haven't they moved? Matthews muttered to herself. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but her words carried a weight that everyone in the room could feel. General Samuel Green, standing nearby, wasn't as patient. "They're toying with us, Matthews. They're waiting for us to make the first move. The longer we wait, the worse it'll be when they finally strike." "We don't know that for sure," Matthews replied, trying to keep her composure. "Maybe they're giving us a chance to prove ourselves. Maybe they want to see how we react." Green shook his head. "Or maybe they're waiting for us to be weak. Either way, we can't afford to wait much longer." The room grew tense. There was fear in the air, but also a growing sense of frustration. The waiting game was taking its toll. Earth's military was on high alert, and people everywhere were beginning to panic again. They needed an answer. They needed to know what the Empire was going to do. Then, at last, the screen in the command center flickered. A message appeared, this time not from the Empire's cold, mechanical voice, but from a living being. A tall figure, draped in armor and surrounded by a faint red glow, appeared on the screen. Its face was hidden behind a helmet, but there was no mistaking the power in its presence. The figure spoke, and its voice was smooth, yet firm. "Earth," it said, "we have been observing you. Your world is small, primitive, and yet you have shown something that we did not expect: defiance." The leaders of Earth watched in stunned silence. This was different from the Empire's previous response. There was no threat, no immediate declaration of war. The voice sounded almost curious. "We did not come to conquer you, at least, not in the way you think," the figure continued. "We came because you have something we need, but your defiance has caught our attention. You have shown that you are not to be underestimated. Your fight for survival, it is admirable." Matthew's heart raced. She hadn't expected this. The Empire was offering something. They hadn't come to destroy Earth. The figure paused for a moment, as if considering its next words carefully. You have a choice, Earth. We will give you a chance. A choice to join us or to resist. If you choose to join us, your world will prosper beyond anything you could imagine. You will be part of something greater. But if you choose to resist, we will destroy you. Your planet will be wiped out, and your people will cease to exist. The words were heavy, each one a final, terrifying warning. The room was silent as the leaders processed what they had just heard. Matthew's mind raced. Could they trust the Empire? Was this a real offer or just a trap? General Green, ever the skeptic, was the first to speak. They're giving us a false choice. It's not a choice at all. If we don't submit, they'll destroy us. Matthews turned to Green, her voice steady, but filled with uncertainty. We don't know that yet. They're giving us a chance. We have to think about it carefully. The room was divided. Some wanted to fight back, no matter the cost. They couldn't trust the Empire, not after everything that had happened. But others, exhausted by the constant fear and uncertainty, were tempted by the offer. Joining the Empire could mean survival, perhaps even prosperity. The promise of peace seemed almost too good to pass up. We need time to think, Matthews said, her voice calm but firm. We can't make a decision like this in the heat of the moment. We need to understand what this choice means for us, for our future. The figure on the screen seemed to understand. You have 24 hours. Make your decision wisely. Earth, your future lies in your hands. The screen went black. The room was filled with a heavy silence, each person grappling with the enormity of the decision. The Empire had given them a choice. The question was, would Earth stand firm, or would it surrender to the promise of survival? Outside, the ships continued to hover in the sky, silent and patient. Earth's leaders had a difficult decision ahead. The weight of their choice was heavier than anything they had ever faced before. Would they resist, knowing the cost? Or would they join the Empire, risking their freedom for the sake of survival? Time was running out. The 24 hours were up. Earth's leaders had no choice but to act. After much debate and uncertainty, they had made their decision. The choice was clear. The Galactic Empire could not be trusted. They would resist. President Clara Matthews stood in the command center, her face pale but determined. The room was filled with high-ranking officers and advisors, all waiting for the orders to begin. The moment of truth had arrived. The ships in the sky had not moved, but Matthews knew it wouldn't take long for them to strike. She could feel it in her bones. This was just the calm before the storm. General Green, Matthews said, turning to the man who had been pushing for a fight from the beginning. Do we have everything in place? Green nodded grimly. We're ready. All the forces are in position. The defense systems are online, and the first wave of missiles is prepared. But we can't delay any longer. The Empire won't wait forever. Matthews took a deep breath. She had hoped they could find another way, but there was no turning back now. Do it, she said, her voice steady, though the weight of the moment was heavy. Launch the first strike. General Green quickly turned to the officers at the consoles. His words were sharp, quick, and filled with purpose. Launch the first wave of missiles. Target their ships in the sky. Let's show them that Earth won't go down without a fight. The room erupted in action. The tension was palpable as soldiers and technicians scrambled to follow orders. Every second felt like an eternity. Matthews watched the screens, waiting for the first sign that the strike had begun. A few moments later, the first missiles were fired into the sky. They cut through the atmosphere, their engines roaring as they sped toward the hovering ships above. Matthews watched as they disappeared into the distance, hoping against hope that they would hit their mark. On the screen, the ships above did not move. They did not fire back. The missiles drew closer, and Matthews's heart raced. The silence in the room was deafening. The first wave of missiles struck the ships with incredible force. But to her shock, the missiles did not have the intended effect. Instead of destroying the ships, The Empire's vessels emitted a burst of energy, causing the missiles to disintegrate mid-air. It was as if the ships were protected by an invisible shield. Matthew's breath caught in her throat. She had known that the Empire's technology was advanced. But this was beyond anything Earth had prepared for. The ships above began to move, slowly at first, then faster. Their massive forms descended toward Earth, each one massive enough to cast a shadow over entire cities below. Matthew's worst fears were being realized. The Empire had not been intimidated by Earth's first strike. If anything, it had only provoked them. "Shields up," General Green shouted. "Activate all defenses. Prepare for incoming fire." But Earth's defenses were no match for the power of the Empire. The ships above released beams of energy, and the ground shook as buildings collapsed beneath the force. Entire cities were obliterated in seconds. The first strike, Earth's best effort, had failed. The Empire was now attacking with everything they had. Matthews watched in horror as the cities she had sworn to protect were reduced to rubble. It felt like the end. The Empire had not only proven their superiority, they had shown no mercy. Back in the command center, a technician shouted, "Incoming transmission." The screen flickered to life again, and the same figure, the armored leader of the Empire, appeared. This time, their voice was cold and filled with a sense of finality. "You are weak, Earth," the figure said. "Your resistance was foolish. We gave you a choice, but now you have sealed your fate. The first strike was your last." The figure paused for a moment, its red glow flickering as if the Empire was savoring the moment. "Your cities will fall. Your people will perish. This is the cost of defiance." Matthews clenched her fists. The loss was devastating, but she refused to give up. "We won't stop fighting," she said, her voice hoarse but filled with resolve. "We'll never surrender." The figure on the screen let out a low, almost mocking laugh. "Very well. But know this. Your world is ours now. There is no escape." As the transmission ended, Matthews turned to General Green. "We have to find a way to fight back. We can't let them win." Green nodded, his face hardening with determination. "We're not giving up. We still have options. We may be outmatched, but Earth has always found a way to survive." The battle had just begun, and the future of Earth hung in the balance. The first strike had failed, but Earth's spirit was not broken. Matthews knew the road ahead would be difficult, but they had to keep fighting. The Empire may have powerful weapons, but they had something Earth could always count on: the will to fight for their survival. The war was far from over. The battle raged on. Earth's cities were in ruins, and the sky was filled with the smoke of burning buildings. The Empire's ships hovered above, their weapons unleashing destruction with every pulse. Earth had suffered greatly from the first strike, and many had begun to lose hope. But in the midst of the chaos, something unexpected happened. Earth's leaders refused to give up. President Clara Matthews stood in the command center, staring at the screens in front of her. The damage was devastating. Entire cities had been wiped out, and the Empire's ships continued their relentless assault. It seemed as if the Empire was unstoppable. But Matthews couldn't shake the feeling that there was still something they hadn't tried, something that could turn the tide. "General Green," Matthews said, her voice steady despite the destruction around them, "we need to change our approach." Green, who had been overseeing the military response, turned to her, his face grim. "What do you mean, Madam President? We've thrown everything we have at them. They have the power to wipe us out with a single strike." Matthews shook her head. "I know, but we're not just fighting their technology. We're fighting their arrogance. The Empire thinks they can destroy us without facing real consequences. We need to make them realize they've underestimated us." Green narrowed his eyes, trying to understand. "And how do you suggest we do that?" Matthew's eyes sparkled with a sudden clarity. "We need to hit them where it hurts, take down their pride. We've been fighting their ships head-on, but we haven't struck at the heart of their empire. We need to find a way to hit them hard, something they never saw coming." Green paused for a moment, considering her words. You want us to target their leadership? Matthews nodded. Yes, we find their command center, wherever it is, and we take it down. We show them that they are not invincible. If we hit them at the core, it could change everything. The idea was risky. There was no doubt about that. The Empire's leadership was well protected, and their command center was probably surrounded by layers of defense. But Matthews believed it was the only way to turn the fight in Earth's favor. After a tense silence, Green spoke. It's a bold move, but it's our best shot. If we can find where they're hiding their leadership, we'll have a chance. The next few hours were a blur of frantic planning. Earth's best minds worked together, analyzing the Empire's movements, their tactics, and the locations of their ships. Every second felt like a lifetime, but Matthews held on to the hope that this would work. If they could just find the Empire's leadership, they could strike back. Finally, after hours of research and calculations, they had a lead. The Empire's command center was located on a massive ship, far from Earth, hovering just outside the solar system. It was well guarded, but Matthews was convinced that this was the opportunity they had been waiting for. If they could destroy this ship, they could bring the Empire to its knees. General Green stood in front of the team, his voice full of determination. We're going to hit them where it hurts. We've got one shot at this. If we fail, there may be no Earth left to save. But if we succeed, it could change the course of this war. The plan was set. Earth's most advanced ships, including newly repaired war vessels, were ready to launch. The mission was clear. Strike the Empire's command center, destroy their leadership, and show them that Earth was not to be underestimated. As the ships took off, Matthews watched from the command center, her heart pounding in her chest. This was their chance to make a change in the fight. If they could destroy the Empire's leadership, they might be able to turn the tide of the war. The ships flew through the vastness of space, racing toward the Empire's command center. The tension was thick in the air. Matthews could feel the weight of the mission bearing down on her. Every person involved knew the risks. They could fail, and if they did, it would mean the end of everything. When they arrived, the sight of the massive Empire ship was overwhelming. It was like a fortress, a towering structure that seemed invincible. But Matthews and her team had a plan. They would infiltrate the ship, find the leadership, and destroy it before the Empire could even react. The battle was fierce. The Empire's defenses were stronger than Earth had ever faced, but they hadn't counted on the relentless drive of humanity. Earth's ships pushed forward, firing at the Empire's defenses, slowly making their way inside the ship. And then, just as Matthews had hoped, they reached the heart of the ship. There, in the center of the command center, they found the Empire's leadership, a group of armored figures, standing in front of a giant screen, watching the battle unfold. The Earth forces moved quickly, overwhelming the guards and taking down the leadership in a matter of moments. The battle had been long and hard, but in the end, they had succeeded. The moment they destroyed the leadership, the Empire's ships above Earth faltered. Without their command, the remaining forces were thrown into disarray. Earth's ships continued to push forward, dealing devastating blows to the Empire's remaining fleet. The tide of the battle had shifted. Earth's forces had delivered the blow the Empire never saw coming. The war was far from over, but for the first time since the Empire's arrival, Matthews felt a glimmer of hope. They had changed the fight. The Empire might have been powerful, but they were not invincible. Earth had just shown them that. And with this victory, Matthews knew that they could win the war. It wasn't just about strength. It was about the will to fight. And Earth had plenty of that. The war had raged on for weeks, and Earth's forces had made incredible strides. After striking at the heart of the Empire and destroying their leadership, something unexpected had happened. The Empire, once so confident in their power, was faltering. Their once imposing fleet now seemed uncertain, their actions slower, more hesitant. President Clara Matthews stood in the command center, watching the live feeds from space. Earth's ships were still in the fight, but now there was a change in the air. The Empire's fleet had begun to retreat. General Green was standing next to her, his eyes glued to the screen. "This is unbelievable," he murmured. "After everything we've thrown at them, they're pulling back." Matthew's face remained unreadable. She had never been one to celebrate too soon, but the signs were clear. The Empire was retreating. Their once mighty fleet, the same ships that had brought fear to every corner of Earth, was now retreating into deep space, far from the planet. "Keep an eye on them," Matthews ordered. "I don't trust them yet. They might be regrouping." As she said the words, a technician spoke up. "Madam President, we're receiving a transmission from the Empire." Matthew's heart skipped a beat. She knew what this meant. The Empire hadn't just retreated. They were preparing to send a message. The screen flickered, and once again, the figure of the Empire's leader appeared. This time, the figure seemed different. Their posture was no longer confident, no longer filled with the arrogance that had defined their earlier communications. Instead, there was a sense of defeat in their eyes. "You've done it," the leader said, their voice colder than before. "You've destroyed everything we built. The loss of our leadership, our fleet, it was more than we ever anticipated. You humans are resilient, stronger than we gave you credit for." Matthews felt a strange sense of satisfaction. The message was clear. The Empire had underestimated Earth, and now they were paying the price. But there was no room for celebration. Not yet. The war was still far from over. "You had your warning," Matthews replied, her voice firm. "And you ignored it. Now you've seen what happens when you push Earth too far." The figure on the screen didn't argue. "Yes, we've seen your strength. We've seen your determination. We're retreating for now, but don't think this means the end. We'll regroup, rebuild, and one day we will return." Matthews stood tall. "We'll be ready." The transmission ended. The room fell silent. The words hung in the air like a dark cloud. The Empire might have retreated, but they hadn't surrendered. Matthews knew this was just the beginning. The war was far from over, but Earth had won a crucial victory. Outside the command center, the mood was different. People had begun to take a breath, as if they were finally allowed to feel a small sense of relief. The Empire had pulled back. The constant threat of destruction, of annihilation, had momentarily eased, but Matthews knew it was only temporary. "We need to prepare," she said, turning to General Green. "We can't let our guard down. The Empire may have retreated, but they will come back stronger. We need to rebuild, just like they do." Green nodded. "I agree. Earth's forces are stronger than ever, but we can't forget how quickly the tide can turn." Matthews took a deep breath. She was exhausted, but there was still work to be done. "We'll rebuild. We'll strengthen our defenses, and when the Empire returns, we'll be ready." The next few days were filled with activity. Earth's military worked to recover from the damage done during the battle. The cities that had been destroyed were slowly being rebuilt, but it would take time. The people of Earth had suffered losses, but they had shown their strength. They were not easy to defeat, and the Empire had learned it the hard way. In the quiet moments, Matthews often found herself thinking about the future. The war was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, she felt hope. The Empire had retreated, yes, but Earth had proven that it could stand its ground, that it would not bend or break under pressure. The message was clear. Earth had fought back and forced the Empire to retreat. The battle was not won, but Earth had made it clear that they were not to be underestimated, and in the end, that would be the key to their survival. The Empire may have pulled back for now, but they were not finished. And neither was Earth. When the Empire returned, Earth would be ready. There was no going back, no surrender. Earth had drawn its line in the sand, and they would fight until the very end.